Hey everyone, hope you're doing great today. We're going to be talking about Monday.com, what it is, why it matters, and kind of giving you a quick rundown of all the different UI buttons or features that are currently available to help you get comfortable with navigating the actual ecosystem. So, Monday, to begin with, it's a relational database. Really fancy for saying you have an item here, and they can talk to each other. So, a really good way to think about this is that you have one project with the timelines, the assignees, the budgets, all related back to that one project. And Monday does this through boards and items. But what even is that, and what exactly are we looking at the moment? So, first things first, we have our left-hand side navigation panel. And this is essentially where we can see a few important keynotes. Our workspace, this really big blue button, these tabs here, and a few more tabs. So here is our home page, which takes us to basically a quick glance of everything going on at the moment, from updates, current workspaces, any recently visited boards. We have the My Work view, which I'll touch on later, as well as a More tab, which will give us a quick search. So if I need to ever search up for something, let's say SOW's board, so scope of work, as well as the template center and any apps. On top of that, we have the boards here, kind of what I was talking about. But how do we even create a board, and how do we even get started inside of Monday? So the biggest thing that you're going to notice is that Monday uses this terminology called boards. So if I were to go here and select a board, you're going to notice that it's basically like an Excel sheet. But before we get to that, let me go ahead and name it. So let's call it example project 1. I'm going to call it name. I'm going to change this into tasks, and I'm going to create a board. And so here we are. Like I was saying, it's basically like an Excel sheet, but on steroids, and can do even more than what you could even imagine. So when we're in here, you're going to notice a few key UI features. For example, the main table, the dashboard, a group, and all these other buttons, sidekick, integrate, automate, it's a lot going on. So I want to kind of take a step back and understand what is the hierarchy of Monday, how do we are currently going to be using boards, and how we can go ahead and start building some of our first tasks. So I'm actually going to go ahead and jump into here. I built this out in two separate ways. I wasn't sure what would be a little bit easier to understand. But a good way to see this is, at least on the left-hand side, is we have a board that is your Excel sheet, right? Where you have rows and columns. But those rows and columns can be grouped, let's say by stages. To begin with, or to start, in preparation, under review, completed. And so you could have group 1, and each group can have multiple items, item 1 and item 2. But each of those items can have sub-items, sub-item 1 and sub-item 2. And all of these boards nest underneath a folder, which then nests underneath a workspace. Heading back into here, we can see we have a board 1. I can click into here and select a folder, name it, and move these different boards in here. And if you remember, we have the groups. So going from folder, from workspace, to folder, to board, to group, which we can go ahead and open and close, to then sub-item. So sub-item 1, sub-item 2. And that's what this structure is essentially explaining. A better way to see this is that you can have the workspace with the folder and the boards, the group, task, and subtask. But it might seem a little bit daunting, but do you see how there's all these different arrows? This is because there's a relationship that can happen not just between, as I mentioned previously, the project with the items, the timelines, the due dates, etc., to one single project, but a different project can talk to another project, which means another board can talk to another board, which will be part of video 2, where I actually go into a little bit more of understanding, or actually video 3, excuse me, where I start talking about more advanced concepts like relational databases, the connectivities behind them, how you can mirror data, so on and so forth. But all this to say, one board can talk to another board, and data can flow from one location to another, even from a workspace to another workspace. So jumping back into our area, going top bottom, how can we actually use these different structures and understand what their purpose is? So first things first, a workspace is almost like a department. So you may have a workspace for HR, a workspace for project management, a workspace for marketing, a workspace for financing. And within them, you can then have boards to handle different things. A common use case would be project management. So you may have a project board per client or per project itself, right? So if you have client A and client A has 3 projects, you may have a folder called client A with multiple project boards. So then you may have a second folder where you can see client B with project 2. And then of course, if we want to keep this clean, we can collapse this. So coming into here, how do we actually get started with using a Monday board so we can use it as an example, a task list? Well, first things first, we have these groups and you see that there's add a new group function. So we can click into this and let's say completed, and we can say not started, in progress, and completed. One thing I love is the customizability, and you can also drag and drop these so you can reorganize them in the way that you'd prefer. And the other thing that we can do is go ahead and start typing out our tasks. Task 1, and here we are. Now, one thing that's pretty nifty about Monday is that we can already go ahead and start building some automations. So I'm going to get into this section later, but actually jump into automations because a very common use case is, hey, when an item is done, I want to go ahead and move it away from this. Or when a project is started or task is started, move it into in progress. So how do we do that? We can actually build an automation here. Click manage and select start from scratch. So we're going to click create automation and we can select when a status changes to something. Let's say done. I want to move this to the completed projects group. And then I can duplicate this so as you can see it's done and change it that when it's working on it, move it to in progress. So just like that, when I change this to done and when I change this one to working on it, you're going to notice that both of these are going to move to their own respective spots. And so this is what's called building out workflows. Now, a nifty new feature that Monday released just a few months back is something called group by. So we can group by the actual status column itself, in this case, status, and it's actually going to go ahead and auto sort this for us. And the other thing is that all of this is customizable. So one of the things that we notice is that we have the automations, but we also notice that there's a plus sign here and also a pencil icon here. So one thing that you're going to start noticing as you start working within Monday is that this is an open sandbox. You can use it in any way, shape, or form that you see it. Of course, you need to be creative and really understand your processes inside and out to build them. But once you understand the tools behind Monday, you can start customizing this in different ways. For example, we have maybe a due date, but I may also want the start date. And then we can set the start date to be selected anytime the item is created. Item created, set the date to today. Just like that, it has been automatically uploaded. The other thing that you can then customize is the actual data within the columns themselves. Maybe you don't like the colors or you don't like the wording. That's okay. We can go ahead and change this. Instead of working on it, we can call it in progress. Maybe you don't have a stuck functionality. So let's go ahead and remove this. But maybe you have a different step instead, such as under review. And maybe you want to resort this. And the default label is not started. I'm going to click apply and set. And maybe one of this is under review and this one's also in progress and we have everything here. And of course, we can go ahead and save this as a view. So now this gets us to the new section here on the top. So understanding what a board is, and I know I've mentioned this a few times, it's like an Excel sheet. But an Excel sheet is something like a database, which is really fancy for saying it's a place where you can store the data and then you can pull data from there and start manipulating it to see it in ways that make sense for your team. So that's what this main table here is called. This is the original view, the one that we can't save or tweak, but we can take the same data and reorganize it in many different ways. So in this case, the group by is now the saved version of the main table. So the original groups were not started, in progress, and completed. And then this table view, which we can call it stages view, this view is just taking the same data and just re-showing it to us in a way that makes sense for us. But there's a few other things that we can do. For example, do you see this person column? I'm going to assign myself, and then Sam, then JP. I'm also going to assign myself to a few more items. And why this matters is that you see this person icon here. We can actually go ahead and start filtering this by the individual people. Or we can set a filter to also show me any due dates that's due this week. And finally, I may want to sort it by the date itself. In this case, there's only 2 examples, so I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this. I'm going to change this to August 8th. And I want to sort by the due date. I just went ahead and added a few more dates. The other thing that we can do is we can hide information that might not be relevant for us. So just because you can see everything doesn't mean you should. So I'm going to click a plus sign to add a little bit more dummy data. In this case, a numbers column and maybe a text column. So now we have additional information that maybe is important that we need to capture throughout the entire project, right? So in the main table, as you can see, here's the information. However, in the stages view, maybe our team members don't need to see this. It's not relevant for them. So we can select the hide column, go here to the right-hand side and unselect text and cost and save this to the view. And now suddenly we have a cleaner view of the current tasks. And what's also neat is that we can go ahead and rename this to call it My Stages View, or let's call it My Clean Stages. Because what we can do is we can actually unselect this, go to the filters, and now select the person icon again, which is a little bit of an advanced tip called Me Dynamic. And all this means is that regardless of who comes to this board, and if this is the main view, which we can do this by setting as the pinned view, it means that if I come in, or if JP comes in, or Sam comes in, and this is the view that pulls up for them, this is the information that they're going to see respective to them. If it was Sam, this is all that she would see. Versus if it was JP, this is all he would see. So you can imagine that all of this is automatically done for you, for your team members, so they're not confused with seeing things that they shouldn't be seeing. But you remember how I said that this is a database that stores all the data? We don't just have to create views like this. What if we want to see it in a completely different way that is a lot easier for our team members to actually understand where they are in the progress and what they need to do next? And that's where we can click the Add a View button and find different ways to structure the data out. So in this case, a very common use case if you come from the world of Trello is that we can actually use the Kanban view. Maybe we need to reorganize this so that it's not started, in progress, under review, and done. And we can drag and drop things between different ways. One thing you notice is that because I was in this view and I clicked the plus sign, it actually carried over all my different filters. In this case, I may need to remove this. And now I see all the different things. And we can always customize this to show additional information within the tasks themselves by clicking the gear icon. But on top of that, we can also create dashboards, which you can actually see right here. In this case, this comes pre-populated into your board, all your tasks in progress, stuck, done, task by status, task by owner. Maybe we want to add a new widget or a new task, excuse me. Or if we want to add a widget, which is these mini panels, and I select graph, and I want to expand this, I want to do settings. I want to do a bar graph, which looks good. I want the x-axis to be the groups. And then I want the y-axis to be the cost. How much money has been spent per stage. So the combinations and the way that you can manipulate your views and actually assign tasks and then visualize that data is almost unlimited. And that's something that I really love about Monday. Now, on top of this, Monday actually allows you to have something called a chat function, where you can actually start communicating with people and understand if someone needs any help, if they may be stuck, or if they're requesting help. So we can click this plus sign called, write a new update. The technical term is called item card view. And this is obviously something that you can drag and drop. You can have it fill up your whole page or not, and you can write an update. So in this case, I can add Sam, hey, I need help with this task. And maybe I need to add a picture from anywhere I want, a little emoji, or, which I'll get to in later, I can have the AI help me write a better prompt because I wasn't descriptive enough or didn't have formal grammar. And update. On top of this, one thing that's a very common ask is having a files repository. So maybe I need to go ahead and add a file to the actual item itself. So if I click add a file, I can go ahead and select something. In this case, I'm going to select this very beautiful picture of a fantasy galaxy. And also another very important thing is something called an activity log, where I can actually see all the different actions or steps that have been taken on the item and who made those changes or took those actions. So if someone says, Danny, I can't believe you changed the status to done, we would actually be able to see if it was me or somebody else that did that. Now, how do we actually go ahead and invite people to this board? That's what this nifty invite button is for. So I can select Sam and JP. And now they have been invited. But do you notice how I have a fancy blue icon, but they don't? This is called being the owner of a board. Automatically, when you create a board, you'll be the owner, meaning that you can do anything and everything that you like. But someone that isn't an owner has more limited access, which gets us to the concept of having a hierarchy of user level permissionings. This is going to be something that I'll talk more on video 3 when I go more technical, but long story short, we can limit who does what and set those parameters in such a way so that you can still build custom workflows without somebody else coming in and touching this or playing with stuff that they shouldn't be breaking. But let's say you finally love this and this is the exact workflow you need. We can actually go ahead and save this as a template. It's as simple as clicking the ellipses, so the 3 dots, selecting save as a template, and we have 2 options: move to the origin or duplicate the origin. What this is basically saying is that Monday has something called the template center, and this is like a very special hidden workspace. All it'll do is that if I click move the origin, this is going to disappear from our side panel, but we'll still be able to access this as a template. Or we can duplicate the origin. So let's say you are actually working on this and you want to use this structure as a template. In this case, I'm going to click duplicate the origin just so we can keep it here for the sake of the example. I'm going to click next, and then we have a standard template or managed template. 99% of the times, I would actually recommend you go with the managed template. All this does is that, let's say you have a project template you love and you're not really going to need to change all that often. What it'll do is it'll create a template that has a parent-child relationship from itself to any template that's generated from itself, to any board that's generated from that template. So that means that in the future, if you need to change any of the automations, assign new people, have new timelines, have different statuses, have any form of like new columns integrated, and let's say you have like 20 projects ongoing with clients, instead of going to every single 20 projects, it'll instead allow you to update the master template and subsequently make all those changes across all 20 different boards. So I'm going to go ahead and click next, and I'm going to say it example project 1 and create the template. So you're noticing that it's now saving it to the template center. And just like this, we have the template. I'm actually going to click edit a new tab because you're going to see that the board exists in a very different spot called template editor. So in this case, like the hidden workspace, and you can see the different, well, in this case, there's only one template, but the single board here. But if we go back into here, we can see that it's still existing here. So it's 2 separate boards, but one is a template. So all that means that if I click the plus sign and I go into something called the template center and I go created by me, it's now living here. So if I click use a template, it's going to go ahead and start creating the template board or creating a board from the template, just like that. And what's really neat is that you don't have to start from scratch. We actually have already built out quite a few templates ourselves, which we can share and showcase like some of them. But on top of that, there are already template boards inside of the template center. So not only can you see the recommended for you, created by your team, created by me, you can see all the different types of use cases. So in this case, if you're in project management, here's all the different project management boards, templated boards that already exist. So for example, if I want to click customer projects, I can simply click use template, and just like that, it created the board. But what's really neat about this is that these templates can actually have multiple boards and even a dashboard setup. So we have the customer projects, the contacts, learning center. So it goes to show you the possibilities that you can build with dashboards, which we'll get to at the second video. And just like that, that's boards. But now we need to get to the second half of Monday.com and customization, which is your actual notifications, your actual account. How do I even have this dark theme? So I'm going to get through that right now. So looking at the top right-hand side, you notice that there's a few more buttons. This bell icon is where we can get notified. So you remember when I put out the update, it's actually going to show up here. Anytime an automation fails, or you get notified, or someone tags you, or someone subscribes you to a board, you're going to see all these different notifications coming in. On top of this, there's this update feed, which basically is your master hub for everything that's going on in terms of notifications and conversations that's going on. Where I was mentioned bookmarks, all the accounts, and any scheduled updates that I need to send out later. Top of this, I can also invite members on the top right hand side if I need to. So here is the Monday Marketplace, which I'll get to at a later point, but it's essentially custom apps that have been built. Definitely check out Templify. Shameless plug, but totally one of my favorite apps. Here's the workflow center, which we'll get to at a later point, and the search everything, which I already went ahead. And another nifty button called the help button. Here's basically a way where you can go ahead and search up the entire repository of Monday to see if there's anything that, any like articles or blogs that have already been built out to help you out. Or on top of that, you can actually go ahead and chat with Monday support. And they're actually really responsive. We're talking about like a few minutes at a time to actually respond. And obviously they have an AI chatbot to answer any questions or basic questions or concerns. And finally, this button here, Workiflow. So it's going to showcase your profile and your business icon and your name. And in here, we can do a few things. First things first, we can change our status to do not disturb if we're out sick or any other things, so we don't get any notifications while we're out. The other thing, one of my hacks is how to change the theme. A lot of people have it in light. I am on the younger side, so everything has to be dark mode. And all of these other things I probably don't recommend really tweaking with at this point. Instead, I would recommend starting with my profile. Now, this matters a lot. Not only will it show you general information on what teams you're part of, but specifically when you go to notifications, and please make note of this. This is how you can help your team members not constantly be inundated and spammed with notifications and also emails. So you can actually select when you should versus shouldn't be getting an email. And you can also connect your Slack and your Teams, which is weird that it's not showing up. All this means, and I'll get to this at a later point, how and when should we be notified on Monday versus email versus Slack or Teams, and how do we actually determine the logic behind that? It's all pretty straightforward. You are welcome to basically copy and paste what I have, but this is what works for myself and my team. On top of that, we can change the language and the region that we're in, the password and your session history, your working status like before. If we ever need to import data from another location like Excel, Google Sheets, Trello, Asana, etc., we can go ahead and do so. And this will go ahead and automatically create a board for you with all the data that you already have. These two are pretty nifty buttons because you can actually search and see if anything has been deleted. You can see anything here or anything that has been archived. And finally, administration. So first and foremost, this is the spot where you can go ahead and act as the command center for your entire account, meaning the Master Monday account, which would affect everyone. In this case, general would be the URL. So this here can be customized to be whatever you want it to be. Your account, meaning how do you want to handle the calendar function, which we'll get to at a later point. But this basically says, do you want it to go from Friday to Saturday or Saturday to Sunday? Do you want to show weekends? And what do you want to be the default page whenever someone loads up, the default or a specific dashboard? And then the work schedule allows us to customize how and when people are normally working. Customization, being able to change and select our branding. Any major announcements that we want to send out to our team members. Hey, we just won $10 gazillion. We're all retiring. This feature list is super extensive. I would honestly leave it as is because it's already pretty well set up. This is just the status label that is automatically set up. Here's the general fields that are required to be filled out when someone first signs up. And here's also a master way to manage how people get notified. But here is where you can see your user directory, and this is where you can go ahead and manage your teams. In this case, how you can invite people. And you can select if they should be an admin or a viewer, and what products they should be selected. Any invitations that have been sent out, any departments you may have. This one is really important. It's board ownership. The wording sounds weird because it almost sounds like you're transferring ownership from one person to another one, but it's more like you're copying those people. So for example, let's say you have a team member that is leaving the company and you need all the boards and automations that they be built out to be transferred to someone else so that when their user is deactivated, nothing breaks. We can select whoever the current owner is and who should be the new owner and simply add as new owner. So this will not replace them. It will just add them alongside them for the boards. And then the automations will actually replace them. So this is when you have those automations inside of those different boards, you can actually select who's the person that again is leaving and who's the new owner, and then make sure that that gets transferred over. So again, there's no mishap or loss of data or any breakages on your automations. Connections is just in case you're doing anything technical, you can see anything that's connected and by whom. Usage stats is really insightful because you can get an idea of who's doing what and how many automations or integrations are running. So we can look at our storage capacity, all of our automation usage, all of our integration usage, so third-party apps, our API, and how that's currently being used. Advanced metrics to just help us understand usage across different users. And then our managed templates. There's a tidy up function, which I really like. So if there's like boards that haven't been touched for 6, 8, 10 months, you can actually see who created them and when was the last time it was updated and start archiving a lot of these. Content directory is just basically listing out all the different workspaces you have and all the members. Apps on the marketplace that you have downloaded or used. Permissions, this is an enterprise feature, but it basically allows you to customize who can do what. And finally, billing. But this is where we can see our billing information, change our plans, contact support, etc. Our invoices, payment made, and billing contacts. And that's a quick intro into Monday to kind of help you understand how to navigate, how to kind of click around, and how to understand what a board is, what an item, what is a group, and start capturing and mapping out a lot of your processes and tasks within Monday so you and your team can start becoming much more streamlined and efficient today.